The spring anime season was packed this year like always. There was the return of shonen favorites, some breakout romance hits, and 3 adaptations that all came from the same seinen magazine debuting in the span of a month. Due to this, you may have been locked in your house since April doing nothing but playing an impossible game of catch-up, while the feeling of missing out or getting spoiled on Twitter, X, looms over your head. Even then, countless anime with great stories, visuals, or acting have gone completely overlooked this last season. Which is nothing unusual since there are tens of series coming out all at once. No anime flew under the radar more than the 10-episode historical drama series called Ooku the Inner Chambers, though. And it wasn't really even the fault of anyone in this community for having missed out on this one. The title of this video may be the spring anime you may have missed, but Ooku debuted on June 29th. Which very well could make it a summer seasonal anime. Sandwiching this anime between the spring endings and the summer debuts was pretty poor timing for a premiere. On top of that though, there was one more nail in the coffin for Ooku, and that was that, no, it didn't have a weekly release schedule, which means it could be produced by none other than you guys again. The bane of any anime fan's existence at this point is the binge model release format that Netflix gives to anything it can stick its grubby little hands in. Stone Ocean fans were up in arms last year for the same reason, when the series had little fanfare because all the episodes could be watched in one sitting. This model does work great for live action shows, but it often kills any hype for an anime online. Probably due to the fact that every other anime gets released weekly, thus stifling any conversation for binge model shows like Ooku. Those who were excited for the show, like myself, watched it, and those who had never even heard of it passed it right by. Ooku was originally a manga that was created by Fumi Yoshinaga that ran for 19 volumes and sold over 7 million copies due to its stellar writing and premise. Now, I won't lie, the anime did fall short in a few areas compared to the manga, some flaws more glaring than others. However, the story created by Yoshinaga was still incredibly well told in this version. Any complaint that I levy against the production of the anime is outweighed by the important messages and themes. Which is why I want to make this video, even if I do find myself saying, read the manga, it's better. Ooku is a sweeping historical epic that is well worth the watch for anime and non-anime fans alike. Directed by Noriyuki Abe and with music by Kenji Kawai, Ooku had a pretty stacked staff, only bolstered further by the stellar voice casting of Mamoru Miyano, Jun Fukuyama, Eriko Matsui, and Sanae Kobayashi. Really, the one red flag that was raised for me when I saw the announcement was that darn little Netflix production tag, as well as the fact that Studio Dean would be animating it. Often known for their hit or miss animation, it was a coin toss on whether Ooku would end up landing on Dean's good side. Though we'll talk about that more later in the video, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. Let's actually get into the premise of Ooku first and what it's all about. The story is set in the Edo period of Japan, where a disease is rapidly spreading amongst civilians called red-face smallpox. This disease has only been afflicting young men, and across the span of 80 years, 75% of the male population has been wiped out. Men that were still healthy were being kept at home to maintain the family lines, while women had to take on their long-held positions either in the workforce or places of power. This even includes the shogunate, who had passed away from the disease, and with no existing male heirs, his estranged daughter took up the mantle in his stead. In the hour-long debut episode, we are thrown into the alternate history world of Ooku by the way of Yunoshin, a selfless young man who chooses to go to the Ooku since his family will receive stipends for his work there. Once he arrives, the culture of the inner chamber shocks him. The outside world is full of women scrounging for eligible bachelors to give them children, but the inside of Ooku is full of men every which way you look. A sight to behold in a world where Yunoshin was all but the only healthy man left in his town. We are offered commentary on the state of the inner chambers through his outsider perspective. Other characters may be used to this lifestyle, but Yunoshin has known the desperation and poverty from the outside, making him the perfect introduction to this series for us as an audience. Yunoshin's demeanor and strength gains the attention of everyone from the Ooku, leading to the harassment from both the lower and higher ranking officials who live there. Upon the death of the current shogunate, the successor, Nobu Yoshimune, arrives at the castle. Known as a woman who admires strength and hates vapid luxury, the higher-ups hatch a plan to have Yunoshin catch her eye in hopes that he can be her secret swain, otherwise known as the first man to bed the shogunate, who is then put to death for sullying her body. Yoshimune catches wind about this secret swain and ultimately is able to let Yunoshin escape unscathed. However, she immediately questions the point of this ritual, yet no one in the Ooku knows why it began. In fact, there are many traditions within the chamber that make no sense to her, like why women must take on male names when succeeding their families as the head. Her curiosity leads her to the historical records of the Ooku that can only be viewed by the highest ranking officials and the shogunate themselves. These records were kept by a man named Murase, who has been in the Ooku ever since the disease started ravaging their country. He was ordered to chronicle the downfall of the shogunate and the inner chambers in this wake by his superior. These records were known as the Chronicle of the Dying Day. Yoshimune discovers that the secret traditions of the shogunate run deeper than she initially thought, and upon opening the book, we begin our journey into the true history of the inner chambers. From this premise alone, I already know that some people have turned up their noses. Oh, an alternate history world where all men die and women are in power? What is this, Barbie 2.0? The feminists are taking over! I'm an adult virgin. Well, while you're first of all annoying if you thought that, you also probably forgot a key factor of this series. Society wasn't run by women the whole time in this anime. They started out in the exact same world we live in now. In fact, for those who are unaware, this series is literally following the history and successions of the shogunate in Japan. Instead, it's just spun in a way to say, what if all the powerful figures in Japan were actually women, but the male names never revealed this fact, and vice versa with the men. Knowing that the Ooku is where women were traditionally held by the shogun is an important thing to note when watching as well. Women were not allowed to leave the inner chambers ever, and they could never be with another man other than the shogun while there. So the men in the Ooku were then given female names to adjust to the times while they were staying there. The gender reversal is less in the actual power dynamics of the series, since everything put in place is just meant as a stopgap until men can take over again, rather than actually letting women have control or freedom over the situation at hand. After this amazing first episode, the series shifts gears to the beginnings of this gender reverse society once the outbreak starts. We follow a new set of characters, Arikoto and Iemitsu, for the rest of the 9 episodes, learning about the secrets of the Ooku as if we are reading this book along with Yoshimune. This shift to the new set of characters may have put off some viewers, but it was essential to shake off any preconceived notions the audience might have. When watching the first episode, you may have thought this is some kind of utopia. However, the first episode was to show you the cracks in their society, and then the rest of the series is going back to show you where those fissures first formed. The perspectives of Arikoto and Iemitsu show us a world we're slightly more familiar with. One where men dominate and hold on to their power with all their life, even as the world crumbles around them. Arikoto is our first main focus. He's a monk who was forced to join the Ooku when the senior chamberlain, Kasuga, coerced him into revoking his monkhood. His life became that of a baby-making machine for the current shogun, Iemitsu, a strong-willed woman who was the estranged daughter of the last male shogun. She too was forced into this position against her will by Kasuga since her father had no other heirs. Both characters had things done to them against their will under the guise of maintaining society. This maintenance was not for the good of the the people though, but for the good of the patriarchy. Iemitsu was no more in control of her life as a shogun than she was as just a bastard child, since those who controlled her were clinging on to the old ways. She is a shogun in name alone, not even allowed to govern. Her bodily autonomy still non-existent, as she was pushed into having a child with any man she could in the Ooku, even if that meant she couldn't be with the person she actually loved, Arikoto. The loss of bodily autonomy is a new one for men on this large of a scale though. They no longer have dictation on which body they can dominate or when they want to. Some men outside of the Ooku are even sold off by their families to give children to as many women as possible, unable to decide how to live their own lives. This is reminiscent to how women were often treated by their families as objects to sell off throughout history. This point is hit home even further by having Arikoto be a monk. He never intended on having sex or being with women. However, he was blackmailed into this lifestyle and lost both his choice and autonomy at once, showing that society is currently at an in-between phase, where neither just men or just women have power. It's only the rich that have power. Outside of the shogunate, the common people have adjusted to the disease much faster. Their women had already begun to run the labor force and head their families, as the Ooku was lagging behind. At the same time though, we are not shown the men taking up the household duties, as they are meant to stay home. Since they are kept at home, they get to lounge around all day and not have a care in the world except maintaining their own health. So even with the genders reversed in this world, the women are still expected to be housemakers, care for the children, and on top of all that, running all of the businesses. Patriarchy. We are seeing the start of a new society. However, the old society's ideas and traditions are still trying to exist. I think it's really important to know all this going into Ooku. This isn't some girl boss series, and some people wanting it to be that kind of are missing the point. I keep reiterating this, but it isn't trying to show us what if the genders were reversed per se, but rather it wants to show us how would the world cope if they had to be? How would the men cling to their status when they are still at risk for death? Would women also cling to the old ways of society out of fear for change? This isn't the Barbie universe, where life was already a utopia of women in power who all got along until Ken brought the horses. It's the transition of power over the span of 80 years and how patriarchal ideas can still be upheld even in death. That part of Ooku is what makes it a fascinating story. Characters like Arikoto, Iemitsu, and Yoshimune are compelling on their own in the story, but it's the voice acting in this series that heightens the emotions of every one of these characters. You can really tell that each voice actor is acting their heart out in these roles, all bringing rich emotions into their characters, making you feel for their struggles or hating them for their actions. The bitter jealousy, anguish, and helplessness of Arikoto is perfectly captured by my boy, Mamoru Miyano. One of his most stellar scenes of sadness comes about midway in the series, where you can just hear the pain in his words. It's enough to just feel like a knife went through your gut.
なんという無力さや。目の前の妙慶の命一つ。
In Kind, Iemitsu's voice actor, Eriko Matsui, brings that lonely rage to her role. She's angry yet tired, and that dichotomy of her character, blanketed by the haughty exterior, shines through.
今日が覚めたわ。まさかつ。その男、腫れ上がった顔が元に戻るまでは。
Even with Yoshimune only appearing for an episode, Sanae Kobayashi's deep, calm voice gives her that sense of superiority and knowledge.
よく聞け。ここにいる50名は今日限りで全員この大奥を
A short reprieve from the anxiety you felt prior when Yunoshin was bumbling about. Music also plays a big role in how the emotions are drawn out of you when you're watching this series. Every big moment has swelling strings lying underneath, which makes the desperation of the characters hit that much harder, slowly building to a sad, longing violin that makes us feel the tragedy along with them. Harmonizing low vocals give extra stress to contentious scenes between political enemies, while horns blare during the entrance of the shogun that ring through your head. making you feel that grand scale of the anime as a whole, even if it is mostly contained within one castle. I haven't been able to find anything yet, but I would 100% listen to the OST for this anime. It is so beautiful. Now, unfortunately, all of this majestic overture and emotion is completely undercut by the animation. I will preface this by saying I'm not often one to get snippy about how well animated things are. As long as the art or character design looks good and the story stays as intended, I can stomach some serviceable to bad animation. In Ooku, the animation can be good. It can even be great at times. The entire first episode looks so pretty that I was thrown off guard when the animation started getting wonkier as the series continued. One of the more egregious animation sequences happened towards the end of episode 6, where a heartbreaking scene was occurring between Arikoto and Iemitsu. Miyano and Matsui's voices are devastatingly somber, while the strings are building and the tears are swelling in your eyes. It's beautiful and tragic, and they painfully embrace as their voices come to languishing whispers. Then, one of the worst animated kisses I have ever seen starts occurring. It lasts for about a minute and it completely takes you out of the scene entirely. Where I was once getting my heartstrings pulled, I am now laughing at these two characters who are getting smushed together like dolls. I love you so much. Yeah, I love you too. Kiss me, Mamoru Miyano. Of course, Colleen. You run this animation studio now. There's about 500 new shoujo and josei series every season, and season 4 of Chihaya Furu just got picked up. Oh, mama. Hey, Colleen, do you have a second? Am I interrupting something? Get out! Whoa! You can't hit me. I went to the Bush School of Evasion. Oh, really? What did you get your PhD in? Computational analysis and public policy. Wow, that's actually really impressive. Thanks. How long did you go to school for? I went for 5 years and it was pretty grueling at times, but you know, I pushed through and I'm the first person in my family to have gotten a college degree. So what exactly do you do then? I don't know, actually. Anyway, I was coming in here to ask if you had $30,000. I'm incredibly in debt. There were also a few moments where the CGI stood out horribly as well. It didn't feel blended into the scenes at all, and in fact was so diametrically opposed because the art of the anime was very soft. Meanwhile, the CGI looked closer to PS2 graphics, with some of the edges of the background characters looking like they got the 1996 Lara Croft special. Those triangular puppies could cut through stone. Luckily, these moments were brief and largely aren't intrusive to the enjoyment of the anime. Although I did want to point it out because it was just another example of a time that I was taken out of a very dramatic scene because of goofy animating choices. Despite those flaws, Ooku is still a really excellent anime. Even though I would personally say to go read the manga, there are still people who don't really enjoy doing that. And I think this anime is a good alternative in that regard. There are still plenty great animation sequences, writing, and directorial choices that make this a standout series. Especially when you compare it amongst a sea of seasonals that would rather ask the question, how much can we set back women's rights? The story of Ooku the Inner Chambers is bold and uncomfortable. It makes you question yourself, lying within that gray area of morality that can't be sectioned off into good or bad. There's flaws within every character in the series that lead to direct consequences for them down the line, showing us the flaws of human nature and how the imposed rules of society have made us resistant to change. Even if that change is a life-altering epidemic that has wiped out a significant amount of the population. And we definitely don't have a gauge of something like that in the real world. The beginnings of any threat to society are going to be full of panic. But as people begin to adjust to this new way of life, society will change along with it. If you haven't watched this anime yet, I can't recommend it enough. I know that the spring anime season was packed and you're probably grinding away on the summer anime seasonals right now, but Ooku the Inner Chambers is worth it. While it is heavy and depressing, it can still be hopeful and uplifting. The story is incredibly engaging and thought-provoking, with some compelling political drama to boot. Sure, the animation isn't perfect at all times, but the voice acting and the music are nothing except top-notch. In the end, if you thought Barbie was too feminist for you, then maybe just stick to the hour-long Ben Shabibo rant about that. However, if you're an enlightened higher being, then check out the amazing first episode of this anime. Ooku, Smokey, Rogue, Shogun, Oman.